I think we heard a really first-class and inspirational speech from the Governor this morning. And I have to say, having listened to a lot of ceremonial openings, it's very nice to find one with what I'd call a lot of meat in it and a lot of food for thought for this conference. I think Claire suggested that I should sum up some of yesterday's proceedings at the Asia-Pacific International Education Forum, and then also talk about the wider regional context in which our deliberations are taking place. Now, they're two very big jobs in a small bit of time, so I think I'll have to sum up yesterday, by the way, which I thought was a very full, for those of you who weren't there, very full and interesting discussion of the way ahead. To try and sum that up rather reminded me of the divinity student who was asked to do a one-page précis of the Bible. I just don't think it can be done in the time I've got. So what I would propose to do this morning is to focus more on the Asia-Pacific region, the global situation, how that relates to the Asia-Pacific region, in what direction it's all moving, because that's the framework within which your deliberations are going to take place, as the Governor also said. The Governor also said that the conference is timely, and that is certainly true, because we are living in a period of absolutely major and fundamental change in sort of global interrelationships. I'll get onto those in a minute. So I'll try and focus now on those, on the framework within which we're operating. First, just like to say I was delighted to participate in the Asia-Pacific International Education Forum yesterday. It was the second one, I think, and I've been able to participate in both. And 1 year on, I'd have to say this forum has very obviously grown. I think it started off with some, I think 32 international delegates from 10 countries. I think yesterday there were some 143 delegates from 15 countries, which is a substantial movement ahead in 1 year's time. Now, I'd like to start off by talking about the enormous changes that we face. I mean, the world today is entirely different from the world when I retired from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. I mean, the international system of institutions as constituted after World War II have all been subject to enormous change. You have new organisations like the G20 coming up. You have all sorts of, not new countries, but often old countries now playing much more influential roles, not just China and India, but also Brazil, post-Soviet Union, Russia, in the Middle East, countries like Turkey, Indonesia, of course, South Korea and Vietnam in our own region. They mostly now will have a seat at what you might call the international high table, dealing with issues, and they will bring new approaches and indeed new issues to the interplay of international relations. One thought I'd like to touch on education before I get on to the other wider issues. I mean, in the increasingly globalised, complex and interconnected world in which we now live, a country's most valuable assets are the skills and knowledge of its people. And organisations like ACPET, of course, are deeply involved in promoting this. So education remains a central priority in shaping the future, and in all countries, especially the developing countries, education is the key to personal advancement and the pathway to lifting living standards and reducing poverty. Education services are now, I understand, Australia's third largest export earner, which really means that you're in an area of major potential. But that said, I want to analyse now briefly the global and regional framework within which your discussions this week about education are taking place. I'd like to deal briefly with a couple of major issues, and I think the first is the state of the global economy, because so much has been written about that. I think we have to start with it. And then I also move on to the rise of China and India, countries like Indonesia and Vietnam. The world stock markets have had a very volatile and turbulent few weeks, and there are fears that we may be entering a second global financial crisis, that America itself, the supreme superpower we've all got used to living with, is imploding with a $14.5 trillion deficit and is facing a double-dip recession. Now, I'm not an economist, but I don't think that the situation is as grim as it is sometimes presented. I spent some years in the United States, and it's a very resilient country. It's going through a difficult time, but I've no doubt that it will continue to play a major role. The other is that perception that Europe is crumbling economically, and even London, as we see from our TV, has been literally burning. Now, these are, I guess, the sort of perhaps slightly exaggerated problems that we're facing, and prediction is always a hostage to fortune, and I'm in no position to predict the outcome. But I would suggest that Europe, while it's beautiful to visit and well established, it is now in real difficulties economically. Greece is probably the tip of the iceberg. Spain and Italy may shortly face a crisis, and looking for the best currencies these days. Talking to the former treasurer Peter Costello last weekend, and he made the rather amusing remark that looking for the best currency in the world today is like trying to find the tallest dwarf. But I think one thing is fairly clear, that we are moving towards a second currency, global currency, and that won't be the euro. It's more likely to be